The courtroom doors burst open, and a tall figure in an impeccable suit walked in, stopping the proceedings with a single phrase: "That's enough. This is my son." This shocking moment was the culmination of a story that began days earlier, with a seemingly routine walk home. 16-year-old Aiden Williams was returning from his advanced placement study group in the affluent neighborhood of Oak Ridge. He was a black teenager in a community that was 98% white, a fact that didn't go unnoticed by Officers Brennan and Matthews. They were patrolling the area when they spotted him. Officer Brennan, a stocky man with 20 years on the force and a reputation for keeping the peace, nudged his younger partner, Matthews. "Definitely doesn't live around here," Brennan muttered. They followed Aiden in their patrol car for 3 blocks. Aiden's heart quickened as he heard the low rumble of the engine behind him. He recalled the talk his parents had given him when he turned 12 about how to behave if ever stopped by the police. Keep your hands visible, speak respectfully, move slowly, and don't argue. The cruiser's lights flashed and a siren chirped. "Hey you, stop right there," Officer Brennan called out. Aiden immediately stopped, turning slowly with his hands at his sides. "Good afternoon, officers. Is something wrong?" he asked. Officer Matthews exited the vehicle with his hand on his holstered weapon. "You match the description of a suspect in the area. What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Aiden explains that he lived on Maple Avenue and was walking home from a study group. He offered to show him his ID. The officers exchanged amused glances at his careful narration. "Well, aren't you well trained?" Brennan smirked. When Aiden's school ID didn't show his address, he offered to call his father to verify his residency. This seemed to amuse the officers even more. "Oh, your daddy's going to vouch for you. What's he do around here, Mullins? Clean pools?" Brennan laughed. Despite the heat rising in his face, Aiden remembered his father's words. "Your dignity matters more than their ignorance." He calmly stated that his father worked for the federal government. The officers laughed harder. "Sure he does, kid. Probably cleaning toilets at City Hall." As Aiden slowly reached for his phone to make the call, Officer Brennan lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "He's reaching for something," he shouted, though the phone was clearly visible in Aiden's hand. Within seconds, Aiden was slammed against the patrol car, his face pressed against the hot metal. He was roughly handcuffed and loaded into the back of the car. "Resisting arrest and suspicious behavior in a residential area," Matthews said, pocketing Aiden's phone. And as they drove away, Aiden heard them continue to mock him. They rifled through his backpack filled with AP homework and advanced textbooks and chuckled, "Probably stole these from some rich kid." Aiden's name, clearly written inside each book, was ignored. He caught a glimpse of his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, watching from her porch with a concerned expression, and hoped she would call his parents. At the police station, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Aiden was led through processing. He was fingerprinted and had a mugshot taken. "I need to call my father," he said for the 100th time. The intake officer yawned. "Phones are a privilege, not a right. You'll get your call when we process you fully." Officer Matthews appeared, seemingly energized by the situation. "Got one of those honor roll thugs," he announced to the room, leading Aiden with unnecessary force. "Claims his daddy works for the government, probably the same government that sends him a welfare check," a colleague called out, eliciting more laughter. Aiden kept his eyes forward, his face a careful mask. He was shoved into a holding cell that smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Inside, he found an older black man with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes. "First time?" the man asked. Aiden nodded. The man introduced himself as Jerome. "Existing in the wrong neighborhood," Jerome said with bitter sarcasm, acknowledging Aiden's situation. For the next hour, Jerome quietly educated Aiden on how to deal with the system, when to speak, when to stay silent, and what rights they could and couldn't ignore. Patience is your strongest weapon right now. While Aiden was being processed, his father, David Williams, was in the middle of a high-level briefing at FBI headquarters. Known for his laser focus and unflappable demeanor, David was the first Black FBI director, a position he had achieved despite systemic barriers. His new assistant, Agent Rena Torres, interrupted the meeting with an apologetic but urgent expression. "There's a message regarding your son that requires immediate attention." The look in her eyes told David this was no routine matter. The note handed to him detailed Aiden's arrest on suspicious behavior charges in their own neighborhood. No phone call had been allowed. They'd only learned of it because Mrs. Henderson, the elderly neighbor, had witnessed the arrest and contacted his wife, Catherine. David's face revealed nothing as he processed the information, but those who knew him well would have recognized the slight tightening around his eyes, the only outward sign of the controlled fury building within him. He made several private calls to his wife, his personal security detail, and finally to the Attorney General's office. David had learned to channel his responses through the system he had spent decades navigating and reforming. Now, that system would work for his son. David arrived at the police station in an unmarked government vehicle. He wore no flashy indicators of his position, just his standard dark suit, a deliberately understated appearance that allowed him to observe without immediately revealing his authority. He approached the front desk where a heavy-set desk sergeant was typing laboriously, deliberately ignoring the growing line. "I'm here regarding Aiden Williams," he stated politely but firmly. The sergeant with the coffee mug emblazoned with the slogan, "I'm not always right, but I'm never wrong," looked up with unconcealed annoyance. "Take a seat. I'll get to you when I get to you." David remained standing. He insisted on seeing his son, citing his right to be present during questioning. The sergeant's face flushed. "Listen, mister, we got procedures. Could be another hour, could be tomorrow morning." David, undeterred, calmly reached for his wallet. The sergeant's hands instinctively moved toward his weapon, but David slowly produced a business card instead, placing it on the counter. "I believe Captain Reeves would want to be informed that I'm here." The sergeant glanced at the card, did a double take, and his bravado instantly evaporated. "Wait here," he muttered, picking up the phone and speaking in hushed tones. Within minutes, the atmosphere in the station underwent a subtle transformation. Officers suddenly found paperwork to attend to. The sergeant disappeared, replaced by a younger, nervous officer. Finally, a woman in her 50s with captain's bars on her uniform and an expression of growing alarm emerged. "Director Williams," Captain Sandra Reeves said, loud enough that heads turned throughout the room, "I had no idea you were here. Please, come with me." In her office, David declined her offer to sit. "Where is my son?" he asked. Captain Reeves replied that Aiden was in a holding cell and she would have him brought to an interview room immediately. "That won't be necessary yet," David said. "First, I'd like to speak with the arresting officers." She hesitated, but David's quiet authority was non-negotiable. He requested the arrest report and any body camera footage while they waited for officers Brennan and Matthews to report to her office. When the two officers entered, they still had the confident swagger of men accustomed to their authority going unquestioned. They presented their pre-rehearsed narrative. Aiden was a suspicious person who became confrontational and reached for a weapon. David, who had been standing by the window, finally spoke. "And did that suspect tell you he lived in the neighborhood?" Brennan scoffed. "They all say that." "Sir." David cut him off. "Did the suspect description you were responding to specify a black male?" The officers shifted uncomfortably before Matthews answered. "We were responding to suspicious behavior, not a specific description." The moment of confused silence before realization hit was palpable. Captain Reeves watched as the blood drained from both officers' faces. "Your son?" Brennan stammered. "Your—" Captain Reeves cleared her throat. "Gentlemen, this is Director David Williams of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. Now, David said, his voice deceptively conversational, let's discuss what really happened today, shall we? In the small office, the tension was palpable as officers Brennan and Matthews struggled to comprehend that the man before them was the FBI director. Their earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by the dawning horror of understanding exactly whose son they had arrested, mocked, and denied basic rights. David's voice remains level and professional. I'd like to see the body camera footage. Captain Reeves, clearly flustered, immediately began searching her computer. Officer Matthews cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. Sir, there may have been a technical malfunction with the cameras during certain portions of the interaction. David raised his eyebrow. How convenient. Both cameras malfunctioned simultaneously. Officer Brennan, word of Director Williams's presence at the police station spread like wildfire, reaching the local power structure almost immediately. Officer Brennan called his uncle, Judge Richard Brennan, who in turn contacted Police Commissioner Harrison. The two men, playing golf together, instantly recognized the potential disaster. Within an hour, an informal crisis meeting had convened in the commissioner's office. This needs to go away immediately, Commissioner Harrison insisted. Offer whatever it takes, full dismissal of charges, disciplinary action for the officers, a formal apology, Judge Brennan added. Add a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement. The last thing we need is the FBI director making a public issue out of this. The department's attorney looked skeptical. Director Williams has a reputation for integrity. He may not be interested in a quiet settlement. But Harrison was confident. Everyone has a price or a pressure point, he insisted. If he won't respond to an offer, remind him that turning this into a public spectacle could politicize his position. The FBI director needs to appear impartial, not like he's on a personal crusade. As they strategized, they were unaware that David Williams had already anticipated their every move and had begun implementing countermeasures. Back at the Williams family home, the kitchen island had become a command center. Catherine Williams, a formidable civil rights attorney in her own right, had canceled her court appearances to focus on the situation. David returned from the office with a thick manila folder and shared the results of their analysts' digging. Officers Brennan and Matthews had 12 complaints of excessive force in the past 3 years, 9 of which involved minorities. All were dismissed by the same review board member, Captain James Wilson, who happened to be Commissioner Harrison's brother-in-law. David then revealed a statistical analysis of arrest data for the precinct. The pattern was unmistakable. Black residents and visitors were 6 times more likely to be stopped, 8 times more likely to be searched, and 10 times more likely to be arrested than white individuals in the same areas, even when controlling for actual crime rates. This was no random incident. It was systematic. He then showed them printed emails discussing an unofficial initiative called Neighborhood Integrity. It was thinly veiled code for racial profiling, designed to intimidate people of color from moving into or even visiting affluent areas. The entire system was designed to make cases disappear and bury complaints. Aiden, listening quietly, felt the weight of the realization. It wasn't a random encounter or bad luck. It was a deliberate system. A few days later, Commissioner Harrison's office reached out to schedule a private resolution meeting with David. The meeting was set for Judge Brennan's private chambers. David recognized the strategy immediately and, after consulting with Catherine and Aiden, agreed to the meeting. He arrived precisely on time, taking a seat across from Commissioner Harrison, Judge Brennan, and a nervous-looking city attorney. The commissioner began with a politician's practiced sincerity, expressing personal regret about what happened to Aiden. He offered to drop all charges against Aiden, give both officers a 2-week suspension and mandatory sensitivity training, and pay a generous $100,000 settlement in exchange for a standard confidentiality agreement. David picked up the document, but did not touch it. "And you believe this adequately addresses what happened to my son?" he asked, his voice revealing nothing. Judge Brennan leaned in. "Director Williams, we all have professional responsibilities to consider." Your position at the FBI requires public trust and political neutrality. Pursuing a personal grievance through official channels could create the appearance of impropriety. The implied threat was not subtle. Back off or face professional consequences. David set the document down and met each man's gaze. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time today. Before I respond to your offer, I should inform you of several developments. He maintained his calm, measured tone as he delivered a series of devastating blows. He had formally recused himself from any FBI investigation related to the matter, with the recusal filed with the Attorney General's office and the FBI Ethics Division. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division had already opened a preliminary investigation into patterns of discriminatory policing in the district based on statistical evidence that predated his son's experience. All evidence related to Aiden's arrest, including body camera footage and dispatch records, had been preserved through federal evidence protocols. Any alteration of those records now would constitute obstruction of justice. He had already provided a detailed statement to a journalist preparing an investigative piece on the Neighborhood Integrity Initiative. Complete silence fell over the room as the three men processed what they had just heard. David had systematically neutralized their leverage, anticipated their tactics, and positioned the incident within a larger framework that couldn't be easily dismissed. I'll be declining your settlement offer. Good afternoon, gentlemen. As he left, his phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Maya called. Someone from the department reached out to her with information. The carefully constructed cover-up began to unravel from within. Officer Jason Matthews sat in his car outside the City Tribune offices, wrestling with his conscience. The events of the past week, particularly the look on Aiden's face and the realization that he was being set up to take the fall, had shaken him. He had spent 15 years on the force, protecting the department, but now the unwritten rules felt wrong. He decided to contact Maya Rodriguez, a journalist known for her unflinching coverage of police misconduct. For nearly 2 hours, Matthews provided Maya with a shocking amount of detail. How officers were specifically assigned to patrol affluent neighborhoods to discourage undesirable elements, how complaint records were routinely altered, and how officers who questioned these practices were punished. Most damning were the emails and text messages he had preserved, showing directives from superior officers that never appeared in official communications but clearly established the discriminatory intent behind the Neighborhood Integrity Initiative. Why are you doing this? Maya asked. Matthew stared at his coffee cup. Because I joined to protect people, not to terrorize them. And because when all this comes out, and it will, I don't want to be on the wrong side of history. The next day, Aiden returned to school. The halls felt different now, every glance potentially judgmental. His AP history teacher, Mrs. Garcia, pulled him aside and offered her support, a small act of kindness that nearly broke through the emotional wall he had built. At lunch, he tried to explain to his friends the larger systemic issues his parents had uncovered, but found it difficult to articulate the complex situation to his peers. By the end of the day, he felt emotionally drained. As he walked toward the exit, he saw a group of students gathered around a phone. He froze when he saw the screen. It was body camera footage of his arrest, somehow leaked online. His private humiliation had become a public spectacle. That evening, as the Williams family discussed their next steps, the local news broke the story. FBI director's son allegedly profiled in controversial arrest. Officer comes forward with evidence of systematic discrimination. The carefully managed narrative the police department had tried to construct was now unraveling faster than they could control it. Commissioner Harrison called an emergency press conference, announcing a full internal review and promising complete transparency, a standard crisis management response. But this time, the usual playbook wouldn't work. Too many pieces were in motion. Too many people were watching. And too many brave individuals had decided that maintaining the status quo wasn't worth the cost to their conscience or their community.